From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
Welcome back. My name is John, and this is the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. This is the original podcast about consumption, and we are proud members of the U-Run Podcast Network. You can check out all of our previous episodes as well as all the other great shows on the U-Run Podcast Network at urunpodcast.com. With me this week is the host of the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. His name is Sean. Sean, how are you doing today?
Just drinking some Viper here, John. How about you?
I put Viper down because I have to introduce a very honored guest of ours this week. Coming all the way from the other side of the pond, wherever the fuck that is, we have the overlord of the U-Run Podcast Network, host of the U-Run Podcast Horror Movie Review channel, host of the True Crime U-Run Podcast Network, and probably some other shit that I'm forgetting. We have Scott from, you guessed it, the U-Run Podcast Network. Scott, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. What an introduction. The Overlord. Is that how you guys see me now?
No, but that's what I went with off the top of my head. And we picked very appropriate walking music for you as well, if you can hear it.
You did, I can. It's beautiful. It's making me feel very patriotic.
I'm not sure that's where we went with it. Scott, we've been chatting for quite a while now, probably since the beginning of our show at least. So for those who don't know, do you want to introduce yourself and let people know a little bit about what you do with U-Run and the U-Run Podcast Network?
Yeah, my name's Scott. I'm the creator of the U-Run Podcast Network, which is a free network for podcasts to come and join and be a part of, to get advertising on each other's shows and just basically create a community. That comes on the back of two of our own shows, which is the U-Run Podcast Horror Movie Review, where, surprise, surprise, we talk about horror movies, and the U-Run Podcast True Crime, where we talk about horrendous things that I don't like talking about, which normally makes for entertaining listening. And occasionally we have guests pop up as well. Most recently on True Crime, we had Mr. Joe Exotic, which was fun.
I was a big fan of those. And anytime I get to hear Joe Exotic talk about anything, you're going to have my attention.
Yeah.
I really like the concept of how you guys... Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he was wild. He was exactly what I wanted him to be and what I expected him to be, and he just didn't disappoint. Like when he said, "I've got shit to say," and then just unleashed, I sat there with my jaw on the floor like, oh, wow, okay, you really did have a lot to say. It was awesome, awesome.
I can only imagine the stuff that didn't make it to the actual episode was even more insane, which I'm assuming there's cutting room floor stuff that just can't be out there yet for whatever reason.
Yeah, there may be a full unedited interview that may hit Rumble at some point. I'm still waiting to whether I put that together and release it and just see where the chips fall. But yeah, that may come.
I'd be glad to hear it. I really like the concept of your guys' show, like how everything's set up and how you basically do everything you choose to do through the horror movie review more specifically. Like, do you want to just let people know how they can get involved with the U-Run Podcast? Because I think it's a very unique take, and a lot of shows, including this one, try to emulate parts of it, but you guys take it to a whole different level.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea was when I first started out, I was really keen to get other people involved because I was all on my own at the beginning. I didn't have a co-host, and I wanted other people to have their opinions. So I started by letting people pick the movies, and we do that each week on Instagram. There's a poll that goes out and people vote for what they want. And then we do things like 3-word reviews where people can review the movie in 3 words. We do TikTok talks where people can speak for up to 3 minutes. People can leave us voicemails, and all of that stuff just gets thrown into the show. And if I'm honest, the audience kind of just make it easy. So we get 3-word reviews before I go and sit and watch the movie again. And then when I'm watching the movie, I'm like, oh, that 3-word review makes perfect sense. I'm going to use that one. The audience just, I'm inherently lazy, and the audience just do all the work and don't realize.
Hey, if you can get someone else to do it for you, that's basically how our country is ran, is have someone else do it. So you're working at a full American workload that way.
Living the American dream in the UK.
That's probably a better way to do it, at least at the current state of things. So switching into gears into what we're talking about this week, Scott told us to show him no mercy and pick a movie that is very much so up this show's alley and is not one that is picked by an audience. I kind of doubt that this would win any polls that you guys do, but we decided to talk about a movie from 1987 called Street Trash. And I feel like using the word movie is almost a little bit generous, but that tends to be a running theme on this show. As with most movies, we start with a third-party review, and there's a whole bunch of them for this. And this review is anonymous, which is a little annoying, but Anonymous gives this movie 3 out of 5 stars, and he says, "I'm positive that somebody out there will appreciate the parade of severed penises, raped corpses, and melting bodies on toilets that make up this 80s film. I know I should." We're going to come back around to how we actually feel about that, but as we usually do, Sean, tell us what this movie is all about.
All right. So for that, we head over to IMDb. This gets a 5.9 out of 10 from the audience. I guess that's the audience. And we look at the storyline and the plot. Never quite sure which one's the first one, but we're going to go with whatever it says on the top here. It says a liquor store owner sells alcoholic beverages to homeless people, unaware of what the bottles actually contain. Toxic brew. And if we head on down to the storyline, this is care of Zombie Fiend 2000. Thank you, Zombie Fiend. When a liquor store owner finds a case of Viper in his cellar, he decides to sell it to the local hobos at $1 a bottle, unaware of its true properties. The drink causes its consumers to melt very messily. 2 homeless lads find themselves up against the effects of the toxic brew, as well as going head-to-head with Bronson, a Vietnam vet with sociopathic tendencies, and the owner of the junkyard they live in.
I'm going to be honest, that storyline gives me way more than I expected because
It kind of helps the movie a little bit. I mean, if I read the storyline here, I'd be like, this sounds kind of interesting.
yeah, well, until you watch it.
We'll get
Before we go to break, let me ask here. This is my second time watching this movie within about 6 months, and that, I'm going to just put it out there, is kind of a mistake. But do either of you have experience with this movie ahead of this viewing, or is this just like a movie that's lived in the lore of like horror obscurity?
I have seen it before in probably the early 90s. This was a movie I discovered as a late teen, where I was like, oh, that's called Street Trash, and it's got naked boobs and stuff in it. I'm going to watch that. This is my sort of movie. And I remember at the time going,
Sounds right.
I remember at the time thinking I really enjoyed it. And I watched it quite a few times in that sort of 16 to 18 year old bracket. And now revisiting it, it melted my brain. Like the different viewing as a grown adult to watching this when I was effectively a kid. Like, this is a completely different viewpoint on this movie now.
Yeah, that's probably a fair way to look at it. Sean, how about you? Is this your first rendezvous with trash from the street?
This is popping my street trash cherry. So I want to make the disclaimer, when you said at the beginning we selected this was a John selection, 100%. Just for whatever comes out after this, we can blame John for it.
I mean, that's fair. This wouldn't be honestly, this still isn't the worst movie that I've subjected us to in the last couple weeks. It's got that going for it. Sean, do you want to tell us a little bit about the cast and who's actually in this movie? I mean, there's only a couple people that I think are recognizable, but why don't you want to let us know about that?
Sure. I guess there's the only person, like, just looking at the cast list, the only person that I recognize 100% right off the bat, and when I watched the movie I totally recognized, is James Lawrence, because he is, what's his name? He's in Frankenhooker.
He's in Frankenhooker.
Yeah, I can't remember what character. He plays like the main...
The non-hooker guy.
Yeah, the non-hooker, right. The main character, the main male character. A lot of the rest of the cast here, I kind of scoped them out. We've got Pat Ryan. I think he's probably got one of the more extensive resumes, maybe. He was in Toxic Avenger, Mannequin, some other stuff. He plays usually a fat guy. And I think in this movie, he is the owner of the junkyard, the rapey owner of the junkyard. Yeah, and the rest of these guys, a lot of them are like one-off kind of actors. This is their main thing. I think Vic Noto, who plays Bronson, is the other one. He's mostly a stuntman. He's listed as a stuntman in a lot of casts. So the rest of these people, not a whole lot there.
His acting would lead you to believe he's a stuntman as well.
Yes.
The only other guy that I think that people might notice or recognize, and it wouldn't be from horror movies so much, is Chaz Palminteri, he's one of the leads in A Bronx Tale. He's kind of like generic mob guy in a lot of movies. He's in The Usual Suspects.
Who does he play in this movie?
He's the mob boss. He's like
That's
the
not
Italian
Chaz
mob boss
Palminteri.
guy. You sure? Because it sure looks like him.
100%.
All right, we'll go with
100%
that.
positive that is not Chaz Palminteri.
I'm fine with that. So I'm going to say it's him anyway, because I want to discredit him because I never thought he was that good of an actor.
Now you're going to make me look it up here. I'm looking at the cast list.
I'm pretty sure it's him.
I don't know. He plays a gangster. The guy who is the mob dude plays a gangster in
Yeah.
movies, basically, but it's definitely not Chaz Palminteri.
Yeah, it's him. Just fuck it.
Sure. Chaz Palminteri.
Yeah.
Why not?
You know what? He's in it in this movie in spirit, whether he wants to be or not. He is now. It's on a podcast. It's going to be forever. And
Yeah, so someone will update Wikipedia later today to confirm what you have said.
God, I hope so. That would
It will not be
fucking
me,
great.
but someone will.
I do have an internet connection. I could probably make that happen. Before we go too far into the rest of this movie and what attempt there is to talk about it, let's take a quick break and we're going to come right back and get deeper into the trash of Street Trash.
John, I want to know more about cryptids.
Do you, Sean? Well, then I have the podcast for you. Have you heard of the Ghoulish Gallery?
I haven't.
The Ghoulish Gallery is a podcast that features stories of urban legends, cryptids, monsters, and all kinds of creepy stuff from all over the US and beyond. You get the chance to listen to a wonderful host chat with people about their local spooks and share knowledge with everyone.
Spooktacular.
Sounds like a pretty cool option. And when you're not listening to the Ghoulish Gallery, there's also a really awesome website that pairs with it perfectly called The Sinister Scoop, where you can read about all things spooky, be it horror movies, books, social media stuff, pretty much anything involving the horror indie scene.
Sounds scary.
We like scary, and you can check out the scary stuff at yourunpodcast.com.
Tony Darrow is the mob boss.
It is not. I disagree.
He is in Goodfellas, so you got that.
I can edit in IMDb too and make it say so on here.
Do it.
I don't remember how to spell his name now. Maybe later. All right. So we're back and we're going to start breaking down more of, I guess, the story in this movie. And we have a guest this week. So, Scott, I'm going to let you take the lead on this one. Give us some overarching thoughts on how you feel about the movie.
It took me completely by surprise. Like, having watched this as a teen, like, all I remember of this from when I watched it as a kid was like, there's a severed penis and there's women with their boobs out. That's literally my entire memory of this movie. Oh, and a man melted in the toilet. When I watched it this time, it is, I don't know, it's like the worst commentary on the worst warped opinion of the world I've ever seen. So, like, it portrays, it's racist, it's sexist, it's homophobic. It portrays veterans and homeless people in a very, very bad light. Like, all the things that a movie shouldn't do, this does it with pride and kind of stomps through them with no delicate touches at all. It's just like, look, a penis. Oh, look, that man is black, therefore he is a thief. Like, everything is so bad.
And likes chicken.
Yeah.
You glossed over the whole necrophilia part.
Yeah, I don't know how I missed that. But there's something, it's got a charm to it, and I can't put my finger on what it is. It might be the practical effects, because practical effects work in this are trauma level good. I did enjoy, I like an oozing, exploding body part, and this movie gives that to you in bucket loads.
Quite literally.
Yeah, literally. One thing I will say on this is the thing I find most uncomfortable in all horror movies is that threat of sexual violence. And this has that, and it's really unnerving, especially the boss and the girl who works for him. He's the worst dude in the world. And then later on in the movie, where the poor girl's dragged through the side of the bus out into the junkyard, like all of that, I was like, this genuinely is a scary, horrific movie. And I didn't expect that.
Yeah, I think so. Let's get that elephant in the room out of the way and talk about the sexual assault that's in this movie. And the thing about this movie that really kind of, I mean, I'm going to preface what I'm about to say with, there's never a point where I feel like sexual assault is necessary in a movie. I don't think that any movie that uses a sexual assault as a plot device is necessary. That being said, in this movie, especially because this movie is almost devoid of plot for the most part, the sexual assault that's in this movie is, and I think this goes with the overall theme of this movie, it feels like it's just shoehorned in there to be offensive for the sake of being offensive. And I almost feel like that's what the tagline for this entire film could be. And, you know, for better or worse, like the sexual assault that's in this, it's not as graphic as some sexual assaults that we've seen in movies, but it's just like, Jesus Christ. Like we've already seen, you know, going out of order in the movie, like, as we mentioned, severed penises, necrophilia, shitting themselves, barf, all, you know, tons of bum dong, everything you could want as far as that goes. Do we really have to add like sexual assault on top of all this too, just to be the, you know, as Sean mentioned, the cherry to break by some gonorrhea infected street trash?
Tons of bum dong should be a tagline.
That could be a
Should be.
tagline. But it's kind of an underrunning theme as well, because it happens throughout in different times by different people. It's almost like they picked that as the main offensive thing they'd keep throwing at you, and then they just piled more offensive stuff on top until it was about to fall and went, that's perfect, let's release that.
It's just where we need it.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder what they left out.
Yeah, the cutting room floor for this, I imagine, is probably never going to see the light of day ever.
It's probably
I'm sure
burned.
it's destroyed at this point.
Yeah.
I can say that I watch these movies generally when I watch movies that we talk about on the show, it's in the evening and I'm watching them solo, watching them like in my room, you know, at my computer. Generally, I don't watch them on a TV in the house where someone can walk by and see. This is the movie that I felt like
Charles had a couple movies where he's like, I felt like if my daughters walk in, I was going to have to be like the old man who got caught watching porn or something. So
this is probably the one that I would be maybe the least willing to explain. Like, I really don't want to explain what is going on here. And if any scene that you walk in on this movie is out of context, is just like wild. What are you, Dad? What are you watching? Yeah, okay. So is bums, is kind of homeless people, liquor, I guess, sexual assault. Please don't walk in. Let me lock the door here.
You just have to go for the I'm watching homeless porn. That would be the easiest way to cover this.
it probably would be.
And maybe a little bit easier to explain.
Yeah.
So, Sean, you mentioned this is your first rendezvous with street trash. What are some of your initial thoughts on, or did you have expectations? You've heard me talk about this. Did you have any expectations aside from bum dong going into this?
The only real experience, I mean, I've had this movie sitting to watch for a long time prior to you watching it. And, you know, it's just been in my collection and I just never got around to it. Never, like, the cover is very intriguing. And I'm like, oh, that looks pretty cool. Like, I mean, cool subjectively. But when you mentioned it, from what
Cool by this show standards.
what I expected to see was a lot of this liquor being sold to bums and a lot of bums like melting and exploding and stuff like that. What I got is like a lot of these really, it's kind of one of those movies where it feels like they just had a bunch of ideas and they're like, this would be really cool if we did this. And we're going to stitch them together. They're like these little vignettes that are just tied together by this overarching mood or whatever set piece of
Narrative.
Narrative of people, like homeless people be homeless and stuff. Like, it just feels like all these disparate ideas that they stitch together to make something. Like, there's the scene with the guy stealing the food from the grocery store, the bodega or whatever, and you're like, what does this have to do with anything else? And after the fact, he steals all the food. He's like stuffing raw chicken and stuff down his big baggy pants and whatever else he's stealing, cheese and I don't know, all this different stuff because he's promised to make this like really great fried chicken meal
It's a
or
hobo
whatever.
feast.
Yes, a hobo feast.
This is just like when Hobo Santa made hobo stew for the kids in Hobo Santa Claus.
Yeah, just like that. But once that happens, that character is effectively gone until like he just pops up again at the end of the movie, and it doesn't have anything to do with anything. Like, they don't touch on it again. There's no, there's just like, and that's like a lot of these scenes in this movie. The mobster guy, Chaz Palminteri, is in the movie, and he just kind of shows up randomly to threaten people. I mean, there is this like really very taut thread of they're just holding on for dear life of this one thread throughout the movie to try and link it all together. And it's like insanity. It's crazy town.
Yeah. So for me, this was a Tubi find initially. Like, I was aware of this movie, but it popped up on Tubi and just kind of hit play. I'm sure I was under the influence of something and thought, yeah, this guy melting into a toilet looks like what I need to watch right now. And, Scott kind of touched on this, but this is one of the most feeling non-trauma films that I can think of. Unlike Fat Guy Goes Nutsoid, who is a very untrauma movie that happens to be a trauma release, this is the exact opposite. This has all the calling cards of a trauma film with the, over the top neon like practical effects that are very vibrant as opposed to very like drowned out and kind of part of the scene. They almost are the scene. And anytime that you see something happen, narrative wise, it's minimal at best. If I were to resell this movie, Street Trash is a very appropriate title, but it's really just bums being horrible is like the overarching theme I would call for this entire movie. And having to watch it a second time, and Sean, I think I sent you this, as I was watching, and I just said, God, I need to stop watching this fucking movie. Like, that was the only thing I could think in my head. This is now, again, 2 times in 6 months. Like, there's a lot of movies I could watch twice in 6 months and be perfectly content. This is not one of them.
Yeah, I think the thing for me is the fact that they don't have a protagonist in this. They're meant to have a protagonist, but even the protagonist is a bit of an asshole. So there's no one you really latch onto. I'd say the only character in this who's genuinely a nice person is the lady who works for the big fat guy at the junkyard. She's the only decent human being in this entire movie. Everyone else is just not nice, and they're all out for themselves. They're all really greedy. Everything they do is for personal gain. Even the guys, like, you got the scene with the 2 homeless guys where they're sat there having a chat and just having a catch up, and he steals his bottle of Viper from him. You're like, come on, man, that's like your best and only friend, and you just robbed him.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that's part of the hobo code, isn't it? So. Does anyone have any positives they want to talk about on this movie? Anything that they particularly liked?
I think the special effects are amazing. For a budget of $10, it's like even the anytime they drink the Viper, they melt.
$10. They never had $10 for this.
Okay, $2.50. But like the special effects from the melting, from when, like, there's a whole fight scene. There's this whole element where this cop tries to get involved because the gangster's girlfriend goes missing. You could mention anything out of context and just say, oh, aliens came down and somebody bent over to tie their shoe and something happened. Like, that would just fit in this movie. That wouldn't be out of place. You'd be like, oh yeah, sounds like Street Trash. But there's this whole fight scene, and it doesn't have anything to do with melting, but the cop gets stabbed in the back with this knife, and it sticks in his back. And the whole time you can see in the movie, during the filming, during the fight scene, you can see this thing sticking out of his back. Obviously not sticking out of his back, but even that looks good.
Yeah.
So it's like, you can tell whoever worked on the special effects, like, I don't know who did it, but it feels like whoever worked on the special effects for this movie was like someone who aspired or hopefully moved on to do something really good, because everything is accounted for well. There's even scenes where a guy's melting, and there might be things where it's just like some form deflating, or there could be a scene where somebody's melting, but it's a guy in a suit that's like melting down. So it's just the different kind of ways that they shoehorn in these effects they look really, really like shooting way above their pay grade to be in this movie.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, go ahead, Scott, I'll come back to it.
But all of the effects in this could quite easily be in a Troma movie. Like, I liken the effects in this to, they're very similar to the Toxic Avenger, but more so, if the Toxic Avenger and Killer Condom had a baby, I think this would be the movie that those 2 movies would birth. Like, it's got all of the bright, vibrant effects of the Toxic Avenger with the just unbelievably un-PC narrative that runs through Killer Condom. It's like someone sat and watched both of those movies and went, I've got a really good idea. We're going to do these 2 movies, but on the streets. That's how I see this.
I hadn't thought of it that way, but now I kind of want to rewatch Killer Condom, just in the spirit of this concept. So, Sean, you mentioned the cops, which we haven't brought up at all in this. One thing and this kind of ties into the special effects, there's little things that when the cops are involved that I think are pretty humorous in this. They're showing This is after like 2 or 3 bums have melted from drinking Viper, and they have what's left of them in their police station. Specifically, I'm talking about the guy that melts on the toilet, and his feet are left, and his hand that was still clutching the chain. What I really like about it is when they're examining the evidence and they're claiming that there's a serial killer out, which I think is pretty funny because what serial killer melts people into neon goo?
Only the best one.
There's a little detail in that shot where this toilet, the flusher is like on a chain that's suspended above the toilet, which he grabs, and you can see it on the cover of this movie. When they bring the evidence back to the police station, they've rehung the chain for the toilet, so the hand is still hanging up in the air, like, you know, melted from roughly the elbow down, which I like little touches like that are so ridiculous. Like, why would you leave it in the air like that? So why would you transport it just to hang it back up? So,
I like that touch. That was nice.
Yeah, and they also added in the obligatory mortician who eats food around dead bodies, because you have to have that in every movie where you go to a morgue.
is that just a horror movie trope, or is that in other movies too? Because I guess I don't watch enough other movies that have scenes with morticians
In the
but
morgue?
it's almost every horror movie. If there's someone in a morgue, they're either drinking a bloody cup of coffee or they're eating a sandwich and leaving it on, something along those lines.
I feel like it has to be. There's not a lot of movies that have morgue scenes other than horror movies, I don't think.
Yeah, I think it's just a horror.
There's that show 6 Feet Under.
Yeah, that's true. I'd never watched that.
Yeah, it's got Dexter in it, not being Dexter, so it's kind of a letdown. So if anyone listening knows of a movie where a mortician is eating on top of a corpse, please let us know. I'd be interested to see if that expands outside of a singular genre. This is probably going to be the part that's easier. What do we dislike?
Oh, I
about
have other
this
things that I like.
movie?
So do I.
Continue, please.
I like the
Please.
structure, the igloo, the tire igloo. That's amazing. I would live in a tire igloo. There's this whole scene, like situation in the junkyard. I don't know why the fat guy lets them do this, but some of the homeless people were specifically the main guy. What is his name?
Bronson.
No, the main Fred. Fred and his brother live in this tire igloo. And it's like, this is great, man. Why would anybody not want to live here? The other thing that I think is admirable is that this movie, being street trash is the appropriate name for it, but this movie looks really good. Like, it looks technically, everything looks the way that you would expect like a big budget, quote unquote, movie to look. So they didn't skimp on special effects. They didn't skimp on the way that they filmed this. The sets look really gross and dirty. Like, everything technically about this movie, other than maybe the acting, and the acting is actually pretty decent too, all things considered, it's all very admirable. You would not expect going into this movie for it to look this good, for it to sound, well, the sound, actually, that's a negative, but I think everything technically, other than sound, is pretty good in this movie, surprisingly.
Yeah, see, for me, I'm glad you brought up sound, because that takes me perfectly to where there's something I don't talk about very much on our show. I love sound design and how sound design is constructed and how they overdub things. And in this movie, they do it terribly. It's so bad.
It's awful.
Like, when they're having the fight scenes are painfully slow anyway. Like the punch coming towards his head, like he could go to the shop and come back before it lands. That sort of speed. But the sound
Gotta
design,
get more Viper. Be right back.
yeah, but the sound design doesn't fit it. And like when you've got a guy who's dying on a balcony and he's melting and he's dripping onto the floor, and he is screaming at the top of his lungs, and you've got some business people walking below him, just like, yeah, so how's your day been? Like they can't hear it. Like, it's not there. And I love
I mean,
that.
luckily they get bukkakied by some yellow goop, so it's
And why are
okay.
these business people walking in like the slummiest area you could ever walk through?
Yeah, maybe it's like a shortcut to get from where they work to where they eat at lunch. That's the only reason I can think. It's like an alleyway through. But I love that poor production. Like, what's happened there? They filmed the film. They've given it to the audio technicians and gone, this is what we want in there. And the audio technicians know full well they can't give them what they want. And I really appreciate the fact that the audio team just made their own movie and just ignored what they had. Just went, yeah, we're just going to do this. Like, the punch hits, like when they hit, it's borderline like Rocky level. Like that, but it's like the tiniest slap. And I love all of that because that sound department have put in so much work, but it just doesn't fit this movie. They should have been working on something better.
Yeah, they'll do like Foley work where they'll somebody be walking and it's the loudest footsteps. It's like loud, louder than anything else going on in the movie for whatever reason. Like, really?
It's like the T-Rex sneaking up on you out of nowhere in Jurassic Park.
Yeah. Audio is the biggest thing in a movie, and people don't realize how it can change it. Like, someone could go and rescore this movie and redub this movie, and you'd get a completely different take from it. It would still be trash, but you would get a different version of it.
I don't know. I'm a big fan of the idea of just dropping Benny Hill music on top of any movie and making it better. And that might actually improve this if you had like a 20-minute Benny Hill like side story of just, you know, the whole thing with them running in and out of stuff being bummed. I'd watch that.
The ending scene where Bronson chases the young guy through the junkyard.
Yeah.
That would work. That's got to be a video from you guys when this comes out. It's got to be.
Might be able to make that happen.
That whole fight scene thing that last thing is just so painfully slow.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Can we can
play it at up to 4 times speed.
That would help.
One thing I wanted to ask, I get your take on, is the cop is the angriest man in the world. And they explain it away that he was working in another area and he got taken off and put on a desk. But he's not on a desk, he's out in the field. So, like, what's his deal? What's his problem? Is what I want to ask you to, because I couldn't work out why he hated the world as much as he did.
Maybe it's like chronic constipation or something. Just really needs to take a shit and he's so angry about it. I mean, I've been there.
There's really only 2 answers I could think of. One, if you want to think of it from a cop point of view, cops are generally assholes anyway, so why should this guy be any different? And 2, the writers aren't all that strong in this movie and they don't understand what a desk job is. Those are the only things I could really think to explain. So
yeah, because he rivals Bronson, and Bronson's character, I actually like Bronson's character. He's a terrible portrayal of a veteran. He's a terrible portrayal of anyone who's had PTSD, but he is a good villain. You don't warm to him.
It's not an anti-hero.
I'll give Bronson credit for this, and Sean kind of mentioned this in our Terminator episode in regards to Kyle Reese. Yes, Bronson is dressed like a bum, and yes, he looks terrible, but I kind of dig his outfit. Like, I'd wear that tore up green shirt with the, khaki pants, kind of looking like a, certain kind of degenerate. Like, it's not the worst look that I've seen on a hobo.
No, the worst look is the guy with the hat.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah. I hate that hat. Just lose the hat, dude. The purple velvet hat. Just get rid of it.
I can only imagine without the hat. They said he looks too much like Jesus, so they put a hat on him.
He looks like the dude from Chris Robinson from the Black Crows. Like, with the hat, too.
Oh, that's fair, too.
Yeah.
Also fair.
I want to ask why the guy's wearing a gas mask as well. Why is there a World War II gas mask in this?
Fuck with people? I don't know.
Yeah, I like that character. What's that character's name? The guy who wears the gas mask? I can't.
His name's like
Bert.
Brock or something like that. Bert? Sorry.
What'd you call him?
It was a B.
You didn't say
Brock?
The Rock, did you? Oh, Brock.
No, I said Brock. I got the B right.
Rock.
So.
Dwayne Johnson. He would do that role perfectly.
See, that's the one thing that this movie's really missing is some A-list star that got their start on this as like a walk-on role. If The Rock was in this as a bum, that would have made this movie at least 2 hot dogs better.
Yeah. You say that, though. It is a bad movie, but it's not a bad movie. And that's really hard to explain. Like, there's so much in this that is good. But, like, this is... there's a category of movies that exist that are the movies that you can sit and enjoy as you, but they are not the movies that you can share with other people. This is not a movie if you had friends around, they go, oh, I want to watch something a bit weird. You wouldn't go, I've got the perfect movie. Let's put on Street Trash.
No.
I think you underestimate what this show does.
I don't know. I got to agree with Scott. I don't think that when I get a bunch of friends together, like the movies that I want to show to my friends are very carefully curated. And I don't think this would make the cut. Like, I feel like this is a movie where we'd be sitting around and just, there are a few things you'd be like, oh my God, did you see what just happened? that's great. You know, stuff like that does happen in this movie. But I think because the story is just so like piss poor, I wouldn't want to sit through the shitty story to see the cool things that happen.
Yeah.
See, that's the beauty of watching this movie with a group of friends. You're not watching this movie to dissect the plot. Like, that's what this movie is. This movie is, you know, we talk about movies on this show in particular that are the kind of movies that I don't like using the phrase so bad it's good, because I think that's very poorly represented by a lot of people. Like, when people say this movie is so bad, I want to be like, have you seen this though? You know, Black Devil Doll from Hell is usually my go-to for that. This movie has, if you're not paying attention to the plot, let's say you just have a bunch of buddies over, you're drinking beers and doing shit, this is the kind of movie that you can turn and see some crazy shit happening on the TV and go back to whatever bullshit you're talking about, and you're really not missing anything that happens in the story. The only downside with that is there's a bunch of rape and stuff in it. So if you take that, if you could somehow look past that, this kind of is the kind of movie that's like, I want something stupid and insane to put on, but I don't really have to pay attention. Like, I almost feel like paying attention to this movie does it a disservice.
Yeah, I think my criteria for sitting down is there has to be something gripping me to want, like with a bunch of friends, like there has to be something entertaining happening. So I don't know for me if this fits into that, because there's a lot of points
like
where you're
this
just
is
like
100% the kind of movie you would subject me to. But
for you, because I like to punish you. But for like my friend, like for my friends, I mean, come on, John, let's be honest. Like, I'm not going to, if I'm sitting around, like if we're sitting around in a group setting, you and I, sure, turn this on because we're going to be talking. But like I have other friends that we sit and watch. Like, I went on a trip a couple weeks ago.
You have other friends?
Yeah, I do. Believe it or not, like one or two. Yeah, they're inanimate objects, but that's why there's not a lot of talking. We're like focused. We're like actually watching the movie. A couple of weeks ago, I went on a trip and we watched, you know, that's when I had that big dump of like that Steven Seagal piece of shit and other stuff. And yeah, we were laughing at it, but I think there's just stuff in this movie that just moves so slowly. It's like these fits and starts where when they try to give you some kind of exposition, it is so long and drawn out. And then the crazy thing happens. And that's just this like short burst of excitement, but there's nothing to hold me to watch like the parts that are boring. Like, and there's a lot of boring parts in the movie.
Yeah. And I think I'm with you as well. I mean, there's when you go from guy melting in toilet to guy exploding to all these other bits, that bit in the middle's terrible. And it's whether you want to suffer through an hour and 15 minutes to see them play cock football or whether you'll just give it a miss. And that scene is just the wildest, weirdest. Who in the production team went, I've got an idea. Hear me out. He's going to put his dick through the hole like a glory hole and it's going to be chopped off. And then he's going to chase it round as the others like throw it away from him. Like, at what point did someone go, that's a great idea. Let's add that into the script now. Production team, can we make this happen?
And whoever did the prop put a lot of care into it. I mean, that's a pretty good looking dick getting through. And you see it so much. So like, so many scenes of it just flying through the air, like jiggling, you know, waving, flagellating. It's
almost like the bit in Jackass where they fire the dildo. It's almost like that slow-mo. It's kind of cool.
The thing I really like about that scene in particular is the entire hobo encampment like springs to life to hacky sack this like chopped off dick around, and not a one of them gets in and is like, ugh, and moves on. Every single one of them is like excited and thrilled to manhandle this like chopped off dong and then toss it to the next person.
And the victim of the chopping is there's like no worse for wear. He's just dismayed that he can't get it back.
He wants it on ice. I like saying that he's saying several times, like, put it on ice, as if there's ice in this tire shack that they're throwing around.
I'll get the ice machine. Who put the water in?
When he does get it back and he hails the taxi, and then in one hand he goes to open the door and in the other hand he's wiggling his severed penis, and the taxi driver's like, fuck no, and drives away. Like, that whole segment is really funny.
So this feels like a good segue into things that we didn't like. Is there anything that we really need to like explicitly say is like bad about this movie other than what's already been kind of hit on?
I don't want to bag on it. I mean, you know, sound is shit. I think we're in universal agreement that the sound is just horrible, awful.
It is, but I did like it. That is one of the things that was so bad it was good, and I know that's really cliche, but it was. Things I didn't like. I'm going to say the big fat guy who owns the junkyard, like his whole character. Take away the sexual assault side of it because I don't need to emphasize that that's bad, but he's just an asshole from the start to the end. It's like when he turns around to the girl and goes, I pay you $150 a week. You'd be lucky to get that anywhere. She's like, I'd earn more if I was on unemployment. Like he pays his staff badly. And what is it he calls his son? His son's he calls him some really technical name. He's like a domestic engineer or something. And then one of the guys
It's
who
like a
works
custodial engineer, I think.
That's it. And then one of the guys who work for him goes, isn't that a janitor? He's like, not at the fucking IBM building. Like, I hate that guy. Like, he's just awful.
All right. So I don't have anything more that I really need to bag on with it. I mean, this movie, having watched it again recently, I'm going to unload on it momentarily here. But, you know, I hate this phrase too, but this movie just kind of is what it is. So I don't have a whole lot to add. Sean, what time is it?
Then you're in for a big treat, bro, because it's hot dog time.
So I think we're going to start wrapping up on the majesty that is Street Trash. And we're going to, Scott,
So majestic.
we're going to allow you to lead us off on rating this movie. Hot dogs are up to you. You can or can't use. I don't care how you rate it, whatever you want to do. Sean doesn't do things the normal way. He rates out of 11 for some reason. So
That's normal.
normal for you.
Yeah.
Lead us off. Tell us your overall thoughts on this magnificent piece of trash.
Yes, if you like trauma movies, there is a good chance this is going to have something for you. Think of a trauma movie, but like a really low budget. Think of trauma if it had no money to spend, no writing department, and all it had was a practical effects team. And that is this movie. It's not necessarily bad. It's just very out of touch with the world it was released in at the time, and even more so of the world it is now. I took enjoyment from this. There's several things in this that I really enjoyed, and lots of this made me laugh, whether I was laughing because I was meant to, or whether I was just laughing at it because it was awful. But I had fun with this. It was a fun movie to watch. It's dreadful, but it was fun. I'm going to give this 2 rapey hot dogs out of 5. Out of 5 melted vipers is what this is getting from me.
It's be a hard one to top. Sean, why don't you go ahead and give it a try?
All right. Well, let me give it a rip here. This movie proves that it's possible to hate every character in a movie. I think for me, like I do not like any characters in this movie. I don't. I think that speaks for itself. It's a real shame that most of these people didn't go on to do anything else, because I would love to have hated looking at their faces in a different movie. The movie seems to forget all about this whole toxic booze, this whole Viper thing, for probably the middle hour of it all. And it focuses on these nonsensical vignettes about the joy of being a bum in New York City. And it just makes a few stops along the way at having, sex with corpses and bums getting their dicks cut off for, that's pretty much what it does. I have to give props to the practical effects, as I did earlier. The movie visually looks great. I think it punches way above its weight, but the sound is just awful. I had a hard time even understanding a lot of the times what was being said, because background noise was over the top, just like redlining background noise, and no mics. They had like one mic to pass around between all the people. Ultimately, I think the movie lives up to its title. I got to give it 3 tons of bum dong out of 11 hot dogs.
So if you had asked me 6 months ago or so when I watched this movie the first time, I probably would have been a little nicer to it, because coming into it somewhat fresh, it is a visually appealing movie, aside from all the filthy lewd bum dongs that are flopping around, which is fine. I'm the biggest advocate for dong in movie that's out there, because we can put everything else in there. Why not that? But the movie, once you get past the neon trauma goop that comes out of these people once they drink the Viper, there's nothing in this movie that's entertaining. The writing's fucking terrible. The sound, as we mentioned, is fucking terrible. And it really doesn't get, most movies that I think of that are so bad that they're good, they have several scenes in them that are so ridiculous and over the top that they kind of justify their existence. And this movie has the ridiculous and over the top, but the bad side of this movie, which is basically the middle hour of this hour and 40-ish minute piece of shit is so fucking bad and so fucking dragging, and just, it's pretty rare that I rewatch a movie and think there's really something better I could be doing with my time than watching this. And this is at the top of that heap of shit pile. So initially I probably would have been right down Main Street, right about 5, hobo dongs out of 10 or something like that. But right now, after watching this a second time and being generally grumpy about it, I'm giving this a solid like 3.5, like severed barbecue sauced up shitty bum dongs out of 10 Viper melty pools, because I just don't like this. And if I never have to watch this movie again, I'd be perfectly fine with that.
I like that you didn't say just that it was terrible, but that it was fucking terrible. You just say it one time. You said it a few times, and I think that encapsulates the general feeling.
I don't understand where the cult following comes behind this. And I get the whole trauma vibe. Like, I've dabbled in that myself. I don't know if everyone on this recording did this, but I went through a trauma phase in high school where I wanted as much trauma as I could get, because at the time, it's what I could find that was this kind of shit,
Yeah.
So I do have a soft spot for the trauma style of storytelling, but even in the worst trauma movies, or the best, I guess, depending on how well, maybe not the worst. We did just talk about That Guy Goes Nutsoid, but in most of the trauma movies, there's at least something there to kind of progress a story along. This is just random bum shit left and right, with the occasional person that melts. And you're better off just going on YouTube and like searching street trash, melting scene, and you'll probably find 1 or 2 videos that have everything in about a condensed 5-minute format. Watch that and move on with your day.
It definitely needed more melting bums. I was promised melting bums and only got like 4, maybe?
3 or 4 or something like that.
You also get a melting shopkeeper as well, though.
That's true. We're upping the ante. So
Yeah. And he didn't deserve that. I'm going to say it now. He was just trying to run a business.
fuck. All right. Does anyone want to add anything before we switch over to the audience and see hear some other horrible experiences?
Blah, blah, blah.
I'm so glad that the ghost of Chris Farley has come back. So our question of the week this week is one that I think a lot of people were a little apprehensive about answering. I expected more of a response, but we got a few. So this week, our question was, what was your worst experience while drinking? So pretty open-ended. And we're going to start over on X, because that's what I have in front of me right now. Our friend Boomer from Podcast in the Woods have an audio answer.
Hey guys. So my worst night of drinking is also one of my best. After a fun-filled night with Gabby, we came home and continued to drink, where I drank probably way too much. I say probably. It was definitely way too much. And I find myself at 5 o'clock in the morning doing laundry because I had thrown up all over the bathroom rug because I just couldn't make it.
Our friend Dave, who was at Leprechaun 1981, says, throwing up on my front lawn in front of my landlord at the time. Smiley face. So our friend Justin over at Pop Culture Reflections Podcast, he's one of the fellow You Run Podcast network members, and great show that you absolutely need to check out. He says, 2 for me. First, trying to take on a group of 6 dudes by myself who were all wearing drinking team. I feel like did I read this right? That sounds really bad. I'm going to start that over. Sean, you can edit around this.
Nope.
2 for me. First, trying to take on a group of 6 dudes by myself who were all wearing drinking team t-shirts just because I found them annoying. Second, lying in my own vomit after drinking so much at a camping party.
I think one is justified. The first one sounds justified. How many times have you been at a bar or someplace and there's just been the annoying group of people that you want to fight?
More times than I can count, unfortunately.
There you go.
So
Yeah.
we're going to switch over to Facebook now, and Other John, and there's a reason why he's being called Other John now, which is in this response. He says, first and only time I threw up from drinking was at my former boss's bachelor party in front of him and his buddies. I was trying to impress him and the strippers. Yeah. P.S. Feel free to call me Other John since the juice no longer needs those initials. What? Too soon? Okay, I might or might not be drunk right.
OJ.
Surprisingly, we got the most responses on Instagram this week, which usually doesn't happen. And we're going to start with people that responded in story form because these are a lot shorter. One of our friends over from the Krusty Boys, also on the You Run Podcast Network, said, just real to the point, indecent exposure.
There needs to be context to a story like that.
Yeah.
You can't just say that and then walk away.
Yeah, well, that would be, I'm going to put it out there now. Krusty Boys, please elaborate on this story. We will all tune into your show and hear about it that I will be listening with.
Or send us like a voice memo or something. We'll include it in the show.
We can do that too. We have the technology.
We can do it.
At Randomly Eric said, not mine, but a friend in college came to my room one morning and said, I just heard the worst story, passed out in the hall, and some fat chick jerked me off. I woke up naked.
In the hall, naked?
If you're passed out, how do you know it was a fat chick that jerked you off?
Just like those flashes of consciousness.
Security camera, hopefully.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. CCTV.
Yeah. And that's perfectly fitting for this episode as well. A sexual assault drunk story.
Yeah, no shit. So, friends of the show, This Girl Loves Horror from the Girl in the Gay podcast said, I was very drunk and someone put me over the toilet where a girl was throwing up, which obviously made me hurl. So then we were just tandem hurling, which I think that's pretty funny. Like one person's barfing, you just throw another one on the pile and just try to fill the bowl.
Do it in the tank, if there is a tank.
Ooh, an upper decker, a barf.
Yeah.
I hadn't even thought of that. There you go. That's going to look so bad when someone uses it. Oh,
Flush. Why is vomit coming into the bowl from inside the toilet?
it's a mystery. Our friend Average Drusy says, clearing a fifth of Jose Cuervo Gold in a little over 15 minutes as a 16-year-old. Hungover for 2 days after that, and I still can't stand the smell of Jose Cuervo to this day. I don't like tequila at all, so I can relate to that story.
I like tequila, but you have to have like no taste buds or something.
Yeah, well, that might be the case. This one might be my favorite of the responses that we got, because this one is actually something that's kind of predates apparently the current binge drinking trend, which is Borg, if you haven't heard of such a thing. But at Doug Jensen says, drinking 100 proof vodka with Tang powder in it, no water. I pissed myself, walked through a screen door, and fell into a covered pool. I have no idea how I didn't drink.
That's impressive.
And then
Tang directly into the vodka.
that's what he's saying. So,
All right.
which is
I'm kind of curious.
apparently that's what the new thing is Borg drinking, which is basically taking your hydration packs or whatever, Kool-Aiding up your vodka, essentially. And apparently it's going poorly. I don't know. I don't drink like that anymore because I don't need to. Then our good friend BP,
Are you sure?
mutual friend everyone, do I need to drink like that? Maybe
Yeah.
after this episode.
There you
So-
go. Never say never.
So our good friend BP over at Let's Talk Horror, if you haven't followed him, please do. He's one of the best in the business and everyone here loves him.
Yeah.
He says, unfortunately, being an alcoholic for a huge portion of my life has left me with not a lot that I can remember. But one time that I sucked was getting my drink spiked. I got to reread this because apparently I just missed a whole bunch of
I
words
like
there.
the way that sometimes you'll stop at like sucked and then you'll think, what? Scandalous.
This is apparently Sean's favorite part of the show, is where I have to read things that people wrote because I don't read well in public. I
It's a
don't
good
know.
time.
And now I know that the next thing I send in is going to be really wordy.
That's fine. So
Multi-syllabic. There'll be like
Yeah.
5 syllables or more to every word.
So I'm going to try that again. Unfortunately, being an alcoholic for a huge portion of my life has not left me with a lot I can remember. But one time that sucked, I was getting my drink spiked from what I have been told to try to start fights with a group of emos who apparently I mistook for an Asian man. As I was convinced, they took me to Tokyo and was confused as to how they got me there, which I assumed happened because there was neon lights by a local bar. I was told this in the morning by a friend who carried me home and in my room, where I woke up with a bucket of sick and my hands on my shoes. So that was not a good morning. This is a long story, and I feel like that almost needs more context.
That's a long story, quite well told.
Yeah. And knowing BP, the thought of BP being very angry that someone has kidnapped him and taken him to Tokyo fills me with joy. Like that BP meltdown where it's like, why am I in Tokyo? Would be the best thing ever to see.
You know what? Everyone here loves BP. He's a great guy. And one of the things that we have a recurring theme with him is we tend to get him to watch movies that we know are going to piss him off because we kind of want his rage to come out on the show because it's usually pretty funny. You're absolutely right. The like hungover, like rage that would be filled with that would be very entertaining. It should be a film in it of itself.
BP, send us a voice memo so we can include it in the show.
Yeah, and next time you come on my show, I'm sticking neon lights behind and maybe a Tokyo Sky backdrop just in case you to try and cause some sort of flashback.
Here we go.
Appropriate for this show, PTSD.
Does anyone here have a story they would like to share of drunken shenanigans?
Yeah, I've got many. There's one I knew this was coming, so there's one that happened when I was about 18. So I'm one of these people that when I have drunk too much, I Pink Panther and just disappear. I was nicknamed the Pink Panther for quite some time. So I got very, very drunk and I snuck out of said establishment, had my hands in the pockets and was walking down the road. And then someone come out and I thought I was going to get spotted and kind of roped back into more drinking. So I started to run with my hands in my pockets. And I run into a lamppost face first at pretty much full sprint. I woke up the following day in A&E in a hospital bed where I'd been picked up by an ambulance. Apparently I'd got about 200 yards down the road and I'd collapsed and sort of gone to sleep on a bench outside a local library where I was recovered. And it was St. Patrick's Day, so I'd had my hair was sprayed green. I was wearing all green. I looked like a giant pea. It is not a good memory.
Sean, do you have anything you would like to share?
The only thing, the most recent time, doing the beer review thing for a while, there was a night, I can't remember what it was, but it was made videos about two different really high ABV. Like there were several times when I made videos back to back in the same session of like really 14% beers or whatever. But the one, there was like a video that I did where I was comparing all the M43s and like there was like a Boss Tweed or whatever in there, which is like, I think
19%,
M43,
something like that.
yeah, M43 is like, I want to say it's like 7% or something.
Oh, and
and
then
then
it was higher than that.
Boss Tweed is like 11 or 9 or 11 or something. And there were multiple cans gone. And at the time I was like, well, I don't want to let like beer sit open. I'm going to drink this. And I take my equipment upstairs to my room to like transfer it onto my computer. And multiple times I'm just nodding off like throughout. And this was a Sunday night, so I had to work the next day. And I think by the time I finally realized that I should be in bed, it was like 4 a.m. or something. I was still drunk. Like I got to go upstairs. I stumbled up to bed and it was a tough day. The Monday was a tough day, but I'm here. So I made it.
My only story that I'm willing to share that I can remember all of would have been around the time that I was 18, 19 in that area. Scott, did they have Mad Dog 2020 on your side of the pond?
Yeah, they did. I think I was drinking it the night I hit a lamppost.
Yeah. So commonalities, right? So I was, at the time when you're underage, you kind of drink what you can get. You can't be too picky because you have to deal with whatever. So I was drinking MD 2020. I think it was the orange one. And what I remember of the night is there was, where I was living at the time, there was a elementary school in the back of my neighborhood and they had a football field there. Somehow I ended up there. I know I got in a fight because I woke up with several fish-shaped bruises on me. And I slept in this football field and woke up with a pile of vomit not far from where I was sleeping. Somehow not on me. So I didn't manage to barf on myself. So I was pretty happy about that. But they say there's a phrase, walk of shame, which usually doesn't apply to getting your ass kicked in the field after drinking Mad Dog 2020. But I sure felt a walk of shame having walked back to my home after sleeping in a field because I drank too much shitty colored wine and got my ass kicked by someone. It's about the best I could.
Mad Dog was wild. Like,
yeah, and I really enjoy seeing these TikTok videos now of kids pouring like a full pint glass of Mad Dog and just downing it like it's a shot. I'm like, you're going to feel like good luck, like recovering from that. So,
yeah, the thing is they have to learn the way we learn, which was by doing exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
How much of this, like sitting in a park and just drinking and going, yeah, I finished that bottle. And then 20 minutes later, it kicks in and you're cuddling a tree to try and just stand on your... Yeah.
Yeah. And for those who have not experienced Mad Dog, if you want to see some really colorful street trash level like vomit, start mixing your Mad Dogs. And that's basically how you end up with street trash like innards is from Mad Dog 2020. All right. Well, Scott, the floor is yours. Let us know where people can find you, everything you do, whatever you want to talk about. Floor is yours. Please tell us all the things.
Go and check us out. Go and check everyone out. YouRunPodcast.com. When you get there, you'll see the main page. On the main page, you've got our shows across the top. And then just below that, you've got every single show in the You Run Podcast Network. There is a show there for everyone, not just horror. We've got true crime. We've got TV series. Like there is such a variety of shows within the network. Go and click on a couple of those links. Go and listen to some episodes and there's so much there to entertain you. You could lose thousands of hours listening to all of the shows on there and everyone's back catalogues. It's a great place. So go and do that. And that's kind of all I'm going to plug. Oh, and follow us on Instagram, at You Run Podcast. That's all I'm going with this time. Like, the network is the thing I want people to go and look at, because that's something I'm incredibly proud of. Obviously, having you guys and all of the other shows together, we've created this kind of, I don't know, we're like a self-sufficient team of like support group. We're like the podcasting Avengers, just more drunk.
Occasionally high, drunk, whatever, I'm going to mention something that Scott didn't. I strongly encourage you and recommend that you go check out Scott's film that is out now on YouTube. It's called It's With You Now. I checked it out the day that's come on. I've actually watched it a couple times since then. It is a very, I'm not a found footage fan. Like, I'm sure I've said that quite a few times. And Scott managed to find a way to take a very minimalist idea and keep things very intriguing through the entire film, which I enjoyed quite a bit. With all due respect, Scott, it does have its moments where you can tell this is a first-time filmmaker's film, and I appreciate that. But it's well worth your time and worth checking out. So go check that out on YouTube, and we'll include links to it in the show notes so that people can go visit that and give some feedback on that. But I'm a big advocate of supporting independent film and independent filmmakers. We've talked about movies like Murder Size and Blood Gorge and those types on this show, and this is that kind of movie, in that you want to get out there and support people who are going to bring the next wave of horror. Because I think, although a lot of us like these movies, we don't all want to see Exorcist 17 or Halloween 42. We need new things happening in horror, and this is how it happened.
Is now a good time to say that the sequel comes out this December?
You can say that. That's fine. So, and like I said, I'm not saying that sequels are bad, but it's a new idea. And like I said, we're not going to get anywhere as a genre unless we support people who have new ideas. And I dig.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you.
Absolutely. So past that, usual shit applies. Please follow us on all the social medias all over the place. We're at Dewey Pod Monster. You can, if there is a social media out there, we're probably on it. And all you got to do is search Dewey Pod Monster to find us. You can find all of our previous episodes at crap.town, which is an actual website. That's our site, or of course at yourunpodcast.com. And I don't know, I'm probably rate, review, all that type of good shit. And Sean, tell us whatever I'm forgetting. I'm sure there's something, because I always do.
If you want your question of the week answer read on this show, you got to follow us on the social media, and that's at Dewey Pod Monster on all the places that John mentioned, which I don't think he specifically mentioned anywhere, but it's pretty much everywhere. I think we got all those bases covered. Thanks again to people who are answering the polls. Thanks for clicking the links in the description. We put all the stuff that we talk about in the show notes. So if your favorite podcast app allows you to see show notes, it's in there, and there's probably a link to something, and you can probably watch it for free, or maybe it's an affiliate link, or maybe we're pretty upfront about it. Other than that, if you're interested in any of my craft beer adventures, you can find me at youtube.drafttherapy.com, or you can follow me on social media at Draft Therapy.
So I think that's all we got. Ghost of Chris Farley, Severed Penises, Hot Dogs. We've covered it all. We'll be back next week. I don't even know we haven't even talked about what we're doing next week, but we never tell you that ahead of time anyway. So
and we never know.
To social media. Yeah, that's true. We are the worst podcast that we do not plan ahead very well, but we tend to land on our feet. We're like viper infected cats. So come back next week and we'll have something new for you. Cheers.